Alright, story time. Once upon a time, true power starts not with a loud voice or lots of money, but with a kind heart. A long time ago, in a faraway kingdom, the king was getting old and he needed someone to take his place. He didn't want to pass the throne to the person with the loudest voice or the most gold. He wanted to find someone with a big heart, someone who cared about others. So he sent messengers all over the land. Hey, everybody, come to the palace and show us how much you care for others. That's how you win the throne now. At the edge of the kingdom, far from the palace, lived a poor young man. All he had was a patched tunic, some tired shoes, and a big dream. But when he heard the king's call, he knew he had a chance to make his dream come true. So he saved up a few coins, mended his shoes by the light of his oil lamp, and then he went to the market. There he traded some twigs he had gathered for a clean, simple coat. He bought a piece of bread and a small flask of water and kissed his mother's hand. Then he set off down the long, dusty road to the palace. On his way, the young man met a beggar all wrapped up in rags, shivering from the cold. The man's hands were blue and his voice trembled as he asked for some help. The young man felt a tug on his heart. On one hand, he thought of the palace and the king and the chance to make his mother proud. But on the other hand, he thought of the beggar and how his mother always taught him to help those in need. Well, the young man chose to help. He took off his new coat and wrapped it around the beggar's shoulders. He broke his bread in two and poured half of his water into the beggar's hands. Here, please take this, he said. It won't make me look good in front of the king, but maybe it will warm you up a little. And as he continued on his way, he couldn't help but worry that he might not get the chance to make his mother proud after all. But when he got to the palace, the guards didn't laugh at his old clothes. They just pointed him toward a fountain and told him to wash himself up before entering the great hall. And inside the hall, there were all these other candidates wearing fancy clothes and expensive jewelry. But the young man stood tall and proud, remembering the beggar on the side of the road. Then suddenly, trumpets sounded, the doors opened, and in walked the king. Wrapped in a golden robe, he looked like a walking flame, and as he approached the young man, the king's face suddenly lit up with a smile. "Well, hello there," he said. "You look familiar. Come closer, my friend." And as the young man got closer, the king continued, "Do you remember me? I was the man by the roadside begging for help. You took off your fancy coat and gave it to me, didn't you? You gave me back my dignity. You gave me back my hope." "And that," the king said, holding up the coat, "that is what it means to be king." And so the young man became known throughout the land not just as a great king, but as a kind and humble king. The end. Once upon a time, an old king lay dying, his eyes clear. He called his sons to his bedside. "Remember this," he said, "for all to hear. Kindness makes you wise. It shows you what numbers cannot measure and maps cannot show where the hurt is and how to heal it. If you must choose, be kind first. Wisdom will follow." Then he gave them a riddle to solve and a prize to be won, the kingdom, but only after 3 days of games and tests. Each son considered himself cleverest, bravest, strongest, so they played, yet none asked what their father truly wished to see. The next day, the king spoke again. "My sons have shown me much, but I seek a different sort of skill. Tomorrow I will choose one of you to be my heir, not for cunning or might, but for the quiet strength that builds a better world. Show me that, and the crown will be yours." Still, they thought of jousts and battles, of feasts and falconry, not of what their people needed most. When the third day dawned, they stood before their father, each ready to win. And that is when the old king spoke his final riddle. "Show me your heart, show me your soul, show me the difference between right and wrong, and I will give you the kingdom." Now, his sons had heard many stories of his valor and magnanimity, and they had scoffed at the idea that kindness was a virtue to be tested. But that was the test. They had no choice but to show what they valued most. And that day, the king chose the poor villager, the man who had given his coat and his food to a stranger who turned out to be a king. At the coronation, the old ruler whispered, "Wear this crown the way you wore your coat so others stay warm." The new king swallowed hard and nodded. He would try. He began as he had walked the road, one honest step at a time. He opened the granaries during winter so no mother went to sleep hearing a child cry from hunger. He ordered broken wells repaired where the lines for water were longest. He made the markets fair, no rigged scales, no hidden taxes, and posted watchers who answered to the people, not to the palace. He invited farmers, midwives, teachers, and stonemasons to speak in the hall and listened before he decided. He explained his choices in simple words. On market days he sometimes walked the streets in plain clothes, not to trap anyone, only to remember. He bought bread from the old baker whose hands shook, then paid again to give the loaf to a child. He stood where 2 oxen strained against a rutted road, and called workers to lift the stones that made the path cruel. He returned to the palace with dust on his boots and names in his memory. People called him wise. Those who knew him better said, "He is kind first." That is where the wisdom comes from.